Good morning. My name is Phil Butterfield. I'm serving as chairman of the Bermuda First organization. I'd like to say welcome to members of the press and welcome to my colleagues from Bermuda First. We are here today to share with you the second phase of our planning effort to specify the future state recommendations that we have made to the government of Bermuda. I'd like to cover four basic topics before we invite questions from members of the press. The four things I'd like to run through this morning are essentially who are we, who is Bermuda First, to then talk specifically about the future state recommendations that we are making, give you some sense of what our process was to get to our conclusions, and then to talk about next steps. First, who are we? As you can see from this assembly of talent on the stage here this morning, Bermuda First is a group of concerned community members, business leaders, and individuals who have committed their time, their intellectual capacity to develop plans and programs for every aspect of life in Bermuda that would help us move forward on a path of sustained success. These folks are a 1/3 of the population that has worked with us. We're over 90 strong, and it represents every aspect of the Bermuda community. And there are people who met over the last 18 months and worked to produce a document that is this. It's over 200 pages of information that we are encouraging every Bermudian to spend time looking at, understanding, and be in a position to use it to ask questions of those who are functioning as leaders across our society. We have been at this exercise, as I said, for a little over 18 months, and we have produced a set of recommendations for consideration by the government. These recommendations come in three categories: high priority recommendations, quick wins, and the remainder of the recommendations that came from each of the working groups. We've decided, after considering all of the input from the working teams, that there are three foundational recommendations that we are making to the government today. These three recommendations, we believe, are absolutely necessary to set the stage for sustained change across our island. When the Premier first asked Bermuda First to take on this exercise, he asked that we provide him with objective, transformational recommendations. We believe we have met that test. We offer the following three recommendations for consideration. The first is in education, the second is in health care, and the third is in immigration and the topic of talent that's required for Bermuda's long-term sustained success. And you might say, why did you choose those three? Well, we think that they are the most important matters that have been impeding the island for a long period of time in terms of bringing us to a place of success and allowing every Bermudian to realize his or her full potential. So in the education space, we believe that there needs to be a radical change in education because we believe that there must be a system where accountability is the paramount measure of that system's performance. And I think it's fair to say that over the past many decades that the system has underperformed, that we aren't producing the kinds of outcomes that would in any way allow Bermuda to say that we have a world-class education system. So we are recommending to the government that education, public education, be placed in an independent authority. We believe that that structure will allow for better performance management of educators, that it would provide better direction for the curriculum and enrichment programs that students would experience, that it would allow us to right-size the system, to bring appropriate technology to bear, and to move Bermuda into a 21st century position with regard to public education. It's long overdue, and we expect and hope that there will be very serious consideration of this recommendation. We think that the history of tinkering around the edges has not produced meaningful results. And I think it's been said before that if you continue to do the same things over and over again and expect change, that can be labeled as insanity. So none of us wants to be, told that we're being insane, but we want to be progressive. And we think that this is an opportunity for meaningful change. We also think that there needs to be more robust training programs such that students in Bermuda can have the choice of either academic or vocational careers. And so we need a better and stronger relationship between education and the job training, workforce development side of things. And so we're recommending also that linkage be established and there be a set of common objectives shared by both organizations. With regard to healthcare, the second of our foundational recommendations, it is fair to say that healthcare is the most complex issue faced by any government. In every country around the world, healthcare is under stress. Every country you find citizens asking for changes to be made to the healthcare system, and Bermuda is no different. But here we sit 800 miles from the nearest landmass in the North Atlantic, and to expect that we alone can bring the appropriate intellectual capability to solve the healthcare challenges that we face is, I think, a value proposition that is not particularly sensible. So we are recommending that some form of global expertise should be used to advise Bermuda on how we should restructure our healthcare system, and that restructuring should be holistic. It makes no sense to pick and choose some elements of reform and not look at all of the issues that are driving cost and putting Bermuda in a place where one thing that can be said about us today is that as a community we have the highest rate of limb amputations for diabetes of anywhere in the world. That status of infamy is not something that we should be particularly proud of. So we need more programmatic management of chronic disease. We need more preventative care, and we need, more sustained approaches to health care. Pardon my voice, it's not an emotional response to the topic, but an indication of age. So we are very clear in where we sit in terms of our recommendation for health care. We believe that our work team has done substantive work that can stand as a true beginning point for the broader discussion to provide Bermuda with a meaningful long-term solution. They talked to the full range of stakeholders to come forward with their recommendations. And so as you read our document, we'd like you to pay particular attention to the work that was done in that particular segment of the report. The third element is that of immigration and talent. I think it is fair to say that we have a talent deficit in Bermuda today. It's not reasonable to expect that a community of 65,000 people is going to produce all of the talent necessary to be a success story in the 21st century. And so we'd like to see some emotion taken out of the discussion of immigration and for us to focus on trying to find the best 11,000 or 12,000 people that we need to work alongside the 29,000 able-bodied Bermudians to make our economy work most effectively. We believe immigration is a job creation tool. We in Bermuda First believe that we must have an aggressive, positive approach to immigration, and we've made a set of recommendations to the government in that regard. The government has taken this issue of talent assessment rather seriously, and that the Premier has agreed to conduct a talent assessment for the senior ranks of the civil service. And so one of our colleagues is working closely with the Premier and with the Ministry of Home Affairs to try to deliver a talent assessment program that would allow government to identify whether or not the right people are in the right jobs, and where we have talent that is able to be further developed to improve their professional capacity, and we can engineer placement of those individuals overseas for further career development so that they come back with a much more robust, career capability and make their mark here at home. And we think the same is true across the rest of the business community as well. And we would encourage the government to be very transparent about this effort. We should be very clear on how we have made assessments of talent and what decisions that have resulted as an impact of that talent assessment. So those three elements represent the principal recommendations out of the high priority segment. There are 7 other high priority recommendations as well that address a range of topics. We have socialized these recommendations with the Premier and with key ministers, so there is a level of awareness and engagement. But you should know that at the outset, one of the discussions we had with the Premier was whether or not government ministers and or senior civil servants should be a part of this planning exercise. And the conclusion that he made was that he did not want those particular persons represented in the discussion because he wanted an objective outside external point of view. And we actually applaud that. We think that was a courageous choice to have made on his part. But it inherently speaks to a level of positive tension, I would describe it, where at some juncture, and we're at that point right now, where we in Bermuda First and the departments within government need to have the adult conversation about how we reconcile the recommendations that we have made with some of the programmatic choices and decisions that have been made by government. And we're ready to have that kind of robust dialogue. A few words about our process. We have had 8 working groups to produce the document that I managed to hold up just a few minutes ago. If I forget any of the 8 names, I'm sure my colleagues on the platform here will appropriately pull my coattails or throw something in my direction. But we looked at economic diversification. We studied opportunities to further develop the Bermuda economy. We studied international business to determine what things that we need to do to continue to sustain the principal driving force for Bermuda's economy today. We looked at education, health care, the infrastructure, what ought we to be doing about transportation, bridges, roads, and all of the other elements of infrastructure that speak to how any community would sustain itself over a period of time. We looked at technology. How might we try to leapfrog the position that we hold today? We think, and from a general perspective, that we have been reluctant in Bermuda to embrace some of the technological opportunities that are available in today's marketplace. And we think in a community of our size, we should be able to take risks and to utilize technology in a more substantive way. So we've made some recommendations in that regard. We also have discussed the socioeconomic foundations of the island. And we had a team looking at what those issues are and how might they be addressed, whether it is seniors or antisocial behavior, and/or issues that are related to how in the education system we can take a more aggressive posture toward the presentations in the classroom that impede learning. So we have been quite thorough in our endeavors to make sure that we have left no stone unturned. And I think I've covered 7. Tourism. Yeah, please. I'm glad. Well, Malika is here, but Andy Burrows isn't. If he were here, he'd be reaching out and trying to pinch me. But yes, we did take a look at hospitality and tourism and have made some recommendations for how we can elevate the level of awareness throughout Bermuda about the things that are underway today and the things that are under consideration that will allow Bermuda to continue to have an attractive value proposition in the tourism space. So we had all of those 8 working groups. Every working group had co-chairs, the theory being that sometimes, persons who, want to be in the room had their day job obligations, and so we wanted to make sure that work could be continued in that respect. So every one of the 8 had co-chairs, and co-chairs also serve on our board of directors. We have a 22-person board of directors, and that helps to, and a 5-person executive committee members, actually the 4 gentlemen who are standing to my left, and who from time to time will, keep me in check. But the idea was to have a structure that allowed us to be flexible, allowed us to be adaptive, and allowed us to be responsive to the needs of this particular exercise. We decided that our planning process would occur in 3 phases. The first phase was to agree on the current state of affairs. We felt that it was important to agree on where you are before you had a meaningful discussion about where you want to go. And so we spent the first 6-7 months agreeing what the current state of affairs was for each of those 8 areas. And we shared that set of conclusions with the Premier in July of 2018. Then we began work on the second phase of the program, which was the development of the future state recommendations, which I've shared with you today. And we spent the month of December assessing and prioritizing those future state recommendations to come up with the segmentation of high priority, quick wins, and all other recommendations. We had a scoring tool that was developed for us by one of the Big 4 accounting firms to ensure that we looked consistently at each of the recommendations and valued them within a structure that would allow us to affirm to ourselves that the choices that we were making were indeed the correct choices to be made. In February of 2019, we shared a draft of our recommendations with the Premier in anticipation of the budget for the coming year to be established. And the thinking there was simply if there was anything meaningful that required funding that the government could make a decision to support that financial requirement going forward. In August of this year, we produced the final future state report, which was given to the Premier on August 23rd. Our anticipation is that tomorrow the Premier will table this document, which I won't lift up again, in Parliament, and that when Parliament rises or convenes again in November, that the discussion about this document will take place at the House of Assembly. So that's the sequence of activities. Our third phase of the planning exercise was simply to think through how we would support implementation of the recommendations. We feel that in the past, the reason why many reports sat on the shelf was because people did not have experience in how to make things happen. In the business community, that's what we do every day. And we would lend our expertise to think through the road mapping of how you get from where you are to where you want to be. And that process will begin when the Premier responds with, yes, I like, numbers 2, 3, and 4, or numbers 1 through 10, whatever the set are, and then we will go about the work of doing the road mapping for implementation. So that's sort of the final phase of our work, and we're expecting that the persons that you see on the stage and the 90, the other 60 or so who have been working with us throughout the last 18 months will continue to lend their talents to this exercise. Our vision for Bermuda First was that we would produce a plan that empowered Bermudians to have the right tools and opportunity to participate equitably in Bermuda's economy. That's the overriding and overarching framework for our work. We believe that we have done this in producing this plan. We think it is a guidebook for how we can get to a better place as a community. And throughout the document, you will see segments which speak to call to action. And we would hope that as the document is read and digested and discussed, that there will be a momentum established for the kind of real change that's required to place this island in a position of long-term sustained success. I'm happy to take questions, and if I don't know the answer, we've got this assembly of intellectual capacity here. I'm sure we can get more than an adequate response. Yes, Jonathan.
During this process, given what you've learned from it, what would be the consequences of business as usual? Your recommendations not be
Well, I don't know about the rest of these folk, but I'm at a stage in my life where I have had more yesterdays than I'm going to have tomorrows. And I would not like to learn that my time has been wasted if our recommendations fall on deaf ears. Status quo is not a secret for success. For some time I've actually had a bug about Bermuda's motto, quo fata furunt, which is whither the fates shall carry us. That to me seems to be the antithesis of planning. And if I had a magic wand, the first thing I'd do is change the motto. And my colleagues can add their perspective, but status quo is not a path that I think we should at all consider.
So some of these proposals, they sound like they might be politically challenging to get through and perhaps require buy-in from the whole community as well as from government.
Mm-hmm.
How confident are you that the political will is there and that the population will support it sufficiently to enable this kind of difficult change to happen?
It's a great question. I am an eternal optimist. What I know is that my colleagues and I have put forth a set of recommendations which deserve serious consideration. I would argue with anybody, any group, that our set of recommendations are, the appropriate solution to many of the issues that challenge our society. So we're in this for the long haul. I heard an athlete who was interviewed recently say that there is no gain without pain. We recognize that we are not elected officials. What we do know that we have opinions and points of view based upon our experience that we think is worthwhile sharing. And that's what this document represents. And to the extent that there are opposing or competing points of view, they can be reconciled. Parallel paths, you can build bridges across parallel paths, and I think that that's one of the opportunities that awaits us. So, I'm ready to, maintain my suit of armor and engage with the rest of my colleagues in advocating for the recommendations that we've made. Frankly, what I'd like to see is, to the extent that we have co-chairs for each one of the 8 areas of activity, as, we get to having the kinds of negotiations and discussions with government, it wouldn't be unreasonable for the co-chairs of a particular activity to be the principal interlocutors with government. So, I don't think, that's a role that I or any member of the executive committee would want to play. I mean, I am allegedly retired, and several of my colleagues have meaningful day jobs, and they've been very gracious and kind with their time. But I think they're there to offer us wise counsel, and I think that's always going to be available. But I think the sort of nitty-gritty of just getting in the room and having the adult conversations, if that can be directed down at the co-chair level, and the co-chairs would be free to reach out to any of their colleagues on their working group teams to assist them. And if they need us, the grumpy old men, to that is true. I proudly wear that mantle. We're ready to assist, but that's where I'd like to see the level of engagement. Yes, that's how we came to the conclusion about education, healthcare, and immigration and talent. After considering all of the work that had been done, we felt that those were the most important.
Ministry or the minister has talked about some changes to the education system.
Mm-hmm.
How does his ideas fall into?
What a great question. Did you, participate in my dream last night? It is a fantastic question. So to specifically answer your question, today at 12:30, I am meeting with the Minister of Education. And I think that's going to be sort of the first step in trying to reconcile the proposals that he has in mind with the proposals that rest here. But he's well aware of our recommendation with regard to an independent authority. So, this is another occasion where perhaps these parallel paths can have a bridge and we can get something done together that's meaningful and beneficial for everyone in Bermuda.
Looking at the concerns, what sort of timetable would you like to see government move on and make decisions?
Well, we're going to be in a political season pretty soon. And I would encourage us to be deliberate. And, in the U.S., the judicial system has this saying about with all deliberate speed. And, I have a couple of relatives who are lawyers, and I always used to kid them, like, why don't you just tell us the truth? Deliberate speed doesn't really mean fast. I would encourage that we think about all of the change that we are contemplating very seriously and make sure that we get it right. Because the downside risk of not doing the job well is unacceptable. And so I'm not in the quick fix business, and I don't believe any of my colleagues are. And so I don't have a timetable, but I do want to begin serious work as quickly as possible. Because I think the sooner we do the serious work and reconcile the differences or complementary or either conflicting issues that we have, the better. And then we can move forward with, deliberate speed, which I would like to see be a meaningful pace of activity.
You mentioned possible political season coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any interaction between the group and the opposition?
No, this was an exercise funded by the government of the day. And my colleagues and I have always recognized that the Premier is our client. And so when he tables this document in Parliament tomorrow, then every elected member of the Assembly will have access to it. And we stand ready to engage with anyone who might have questions or would like to have discussions with us, because we stand by what we have recommended.
Public want to have a look at the report, how can they do it?
The report, as of this very moment in time, is available on the Bermuda First website. So www.bermudafirstbm, I think it is. And you can download to your heart's content. And what you will see is a summary document of 30 or so pages that speaks to the principal recommendations that we're making. But you also will have all of the work product of the 8 independent work groups. So you'll find the current state assessment that those work groups made. You will find the detailed future state recommendations that they have made. And so we intend to be entirely transparent about our work. And so every aspect of our endeavor is available to all Bermudians through the website as of this very moment.
In your remarks, you spoke to the fact that before you could move forward with the report, the group had to look at where Bermuda was today.
Mm-hmm.
What's the state of Bermuda and the economy?
Well, we looked at the economy, we looked at social issues, we looked at every aspect of Bermuda's well-being. I think the good news was when we met with Cabinet, there wasn't any significant level of pushback that, hey, you've got this wrong. There are always going to be varying degrees of reaction to any external assessment that's made of the state of play. But I would say that we were candid in identifying all the areas where we thought change needed to occur. And I don't think it would be fair to conclude that all is well. There is always opportunity for improvement, and those are the areas that we have recommended for attention in our presentation today.
You mentioned last minute a great group of business leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Within the business community, is there confidence in Bermuda's economic?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, listen, as a retired business person, because I can't speak currently, I'm not in the game as I once was, but I would say business people like clarity. Business people like, the absence of, conflict. They like reasoned decisions. They like to be kept informed. They don't like, I'll speak personally, I don't like surprises. If you work for me, the one thing you shouldn't ever do is bring me an issue that can be described as a surprise. So to the extent that there have been surprises in some of the areas of activity here in Bermuda, that's not a good thing. That's not constructive. We actually think that, given the work that we've done, we can offer a blueprint for more substantive consultation and collaboration. It's not talking at people. It's talking with people and engaging people in meaningful, robust discussion before you announce decisions. So if, another magic wand opportunity existed, that's one of the things that I would encourage that we change. But those colleagues of mine who are, laboring day to day as heads of business can offer you their own views as to, whether or not the business community thinks all is well, or if things need to change yesterday. Thank you. Good. Thank you.